It is January 27th. I wanted to provide an update. It is a big day in the state of Michigan. The House of Representatives has released a COVID relief plan, and this plan is going to help those that are struggling the most right now. Many people are wondering, are their jobs going to be permanently gone? We have a plan that has a laser focus to help those in the greatest need, to help them make it through this. The next part of our plan is helping our students that are behind. We have too many kids right now that are one, maybe two grade levels behind. Many areas, kids have not been in school since last March. We need kids in summer school. We need kids that are doing before and after programs. We need kids in the classroom. So we have a plan that will help get that in line as well. Lastly, we have the federal COVID relief funds. We have a plan to get those rolled out as well. We are not going to give a blank check to the governor with those funds. We are going to have oversight and transparency to make sure that the distribution of the vaccine starts seeing some improvements. So we are going to have a performance-based distribution of the COVID relief funds that come from the federal government. And I am going to get into more detail right now, and I'm going to start out with the economic relief plan. Okay, so here is the economic relief plan. It is narrowly focused on helping those with the greatest amount of need. So first item up is a $150 million deposit into the Unemployment Insurance Trust. Now, that $150 million number is what the state lost through fraud. Now, you have to keep in mind, this trust is basically an insurance plan that businesses pay into, so if something happens, their employees can use this money to keep themselves afloat while they're either looking for a job or waiting for the job to come back. And the government runs this insurance plan, and surprise, surprise, they mismanaged it, and there was a lot of fraud. So it's on the state to pay back what they were responsible for losing. So that's that $150 million. Now, there's a grant process that's going to be created through Treasury, and if you're an afflicted business, so essentially if you're a restaurant, if you're a convention center, a business that has had some very, very serious hard times over the last year, you can put in an application through Treasury, and there are basically 4 items you can submit. So the first one is property tax relief. So if you've lost a large amount of revenue, for instance, if say you lost over 50% of your revenue year over year, you would be able to get a reimbursement for the property taxes that were paid for the winter and summer of 2020. So that's one item. Another item for restaurants in particular, you can get a reimbursement for the liquor license fees that you paid last year and your health department fees for your health inspection. The third item, it's basically a reimbursement, if you will, for payments that afflicted businesses paid in to the Unemployment Insurance Trust. They make quarterly payments, so they'd be able to get a reimbursement for the last 2 quarters that they paid into. The last item on this economic relief plan is $22 million to help pay for the penalties and interest for those that could not pay their property taxes last year. This is a very interesting item. Governor Whitmer has vetoed legislation similar to this twice now. Very interesting that last week she actually put this herself in her supplemental request to the legislature. So very hopeful that we can finally get it. Third time's a charm. Let's get that taken care of this go around. The next portion of the relief is directed towards schools, and specifically we want to have a focus on helping kids that are very far behind now. Let's try to do our best to get them caught up. Let's give the schools and the teachers the resources they need to get caught up. So what's in this plan? So first off, $135 million for summer semester and summer school for K through 8. There is also funding in here for credit recovery for our high schoolers. Um, so there's also a grant funding in there for before and after school funding. We want schools as soon as they start back up next year, and even this spring, to have resources available for grant funding to create whatever type of before and after school they want to do. Let's make sure they have the resources to do that. Um, there's also a incentive if any school is in person 5 days a week, starting on February 15th. There's a per pupil increase for that school, and that totals about $363 million. We want to incentivize kids being in the classroom. It is so important. You know, there's a lot of we don't know about COVID, but I can tell you there's one thing we do know. Kids that are getting left behind, it is going to be a very uphill battle for them to get caught back up. And we have to make sure we start emphasizing kids being in the classroom. So there's an incentive for teachers, $21 million. There'll be a $1,000 bonus for any teacher that teaches during the summer school, and $250 for any staff member who's in there, making sure we get these summer schools off the ground. A couple of federal funds that are being released there. There is the $1.5 billion of federal dollars that came through the COVID relief funds, and that is basically pass-through funds that will go to the local school districts based on their current Title I funding. And this is the last item here is something new that the federal government put out. Again, this is federal COVID relief funds, and this goes to schools that are non-government run schools. So we want to make sure we get those out to those schools as well. All right, the last portion we have here are the federal COVID relief funds. I've been pretty public about my thoughts and how these should be spent. We're simply not going to give Governor Whitmer a blank check to continue to operate the way she has. So what we're going to do is these items here, we're going to give a quarter of the funding that has been provided and to us from the federal government. We're going to give a quarter of that out to be used now. There's going to be metrics put in place specifically around the vaccine funding. There's going to be transparency. There's going to be oversight. How are these distributions being calculated to certain regions? How much money has been spent? Keep in mind, in December, we provided $52 million to the administration for the rollout of this vaccine. We want to see how that's been spent. We want to see results is what we want, and we're going to distribute this funding based on performance. So, as I said, there's $22 million for the vaccine distribution, and keep in mind, the state doesn't buy any of the vaccines themselves. This money is simply for the logistics and all the costs that go in associated with it. The federal government actually bought all the vaccines and they're distributing them out amongst the states. So just want to make that clarification. There's also $144 million for testing, $165 million for rent and utility relief, and $510 million for the SNAP program. There's also some funding in there for mental health, substance abuse, and Meals on Wheels. So overall, that's how we're approaching the COVID relief funds from the federal government. Now, there's another really big piece of legislation that's connected to the school funding. Is it says the DHHS director no longer has the authority to close schools to in-person instruction. And based on what we just saw with what the governor has done with contact sports, closing them really without any type of transparency as to how those decisions were made. And really, it was just a really severe decision that's upset, frankly, a lot of parents and a lot of kids. We're talking about, I've heard it's 60,000 kids play contact sports and did not have any explanation as to why they're being closed. It just seems like an arbitrary decision. And so we've included language that says that the DHHS director can no longer close qualified sports events which would include high school sports. I appreciate the opportunity to give an update. I think this plan is very, very solid. It's focused on helping those that are most in need. It's focused on trying to get our kids in the classroom and supporting that, giving any incentive we can, any help we can to our teachers to try and get our kids that are behind caught back up. And it also responsibly releases our federal COVID dollars in a way that's performance based, and we can start seeing some better results from the administration. So I appreciate the opportunity to give this update. Thank you, and God bless.